auditors, warrants, and claims, the permit application and insurance approval for Diamond Lake County Park Weed Fest. These are all very general, kind of common events that don't require a lot of discussion. A contract with Lutheran Social Services, most likely a renewal, and then the minutes of the Board of Equalization from June 20th. So those are the consent agenda items. Does anybody wish to pull anything from that agenda?
Mr. Chair, I will move the consent agenda.
Commissioner Gardner moves the consent agenda. Do I hear a second?
Mr. Chair, I'll second.
Commissioner Berg seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. Oh, one moment.
I just wanted a clarification on what Weed Fest is.
I don't know. I was just,
In this day and age, I did a double take when I looked at that item.
I can give you that update or whatever. So.
well, does it have beer?
Well, Weed Fest is something Diamond Lake is doing this year for lake weed identification. So it isn't what it looks like.
Could be.
But
though.
it
Could
sounds
be.
like a real fun event. So there's going to have food and
It
all
might,
kinds
it might
of stuff,
involve
and live band
pontoons and
stuff, so,
floating
yeah.
around the lake. So anyway, thank you. So all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, under our general business discussions, we're going to get an update and a presentation from the Kaneohe County Soil and Water Conservation District. Margaret? And for the record, would you state your name and who you're representing?
I can do that.
By the way, is your groom fighting fires up in Manitoba?
He leaves on Saturday.
He was. I wondered about that. Now you have to explain because they're all wondering.
My
what I'm
husband
talking
is
about.
in fire and is leaving to Canada on Saturday to fight fires. So. Okay. I'm Margaret Johnson with Kaneohe Soil and Water Conservation District. I've been with this organization for a little over a year, and I'm here just to inform you guys of what we have going on. Hopefully you learned something today.
Excuse me one moment.
Yeah.
Are you guys able to hear okay, or would we maybe a little more volume, Margaret,
Yes.
if you could? Thank you.
Thank you.
This isn't showing my notes. Well, I'll just have to make it up. Hopefully you don't miss anything. We were citizen petitioned back in the 50s, and we have 5 supervisors that are elected officials. And the reason why Soil and Waters became in the 50s is back in the 30s during the Dust Bowl era, the Washington, D.C., which was making a lot of the decisions, that didn't really trickle down to the local level. So having a local voice and local supervisors, which are elected officials locally, were able to make those decisions on a local level. Our current board consists of Danelle Williamson, Jane Youngkrantz, Brandon Smith, and our newest member, Steve Friedline. We do have 1 vacancy at this moment. We operate under the authority of Minnesota statute, so we are a governing body out of the Minnesota State Legislature. Our statute is 103C, but we also are governed under other administrative rules like open meeting law, like counties are as well. Our mission is to encourage the wise use of land and water and to treat those resources in accordance with their needs and protection. And how we do that is we have missions, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. But what the supervisors do is they create basically a series of charter. So every soil and water is different across the state. We still have the same statute, but we have different missions depending on the land use, depending on the soils, depending on the water, depending on the infrastructure. So our county benefits and what was set by the 5 supervisors locally was to maintain healthy soils, to make sure that we are providing what we need to, both technically and financially, to landowners to help the major ag industry within the county, to support biological diversity. So this is making sure that we're protecting habitat, reducing pollutants, both surface and groundwater, especially groundwater, because we do have areas within the county that are a little bit more sensitive to groundwater pollutants, to restore natural hydrology where it's feasible, just to make sure that we're not getting slammed every time it rains, to make sure we're not flooding all the time, And then finally, to maintain healthy streams and lakes. So here's some statistics, and I know that this is a little bit overwhelming, but your guys' county is a little over 1 million acres, and a good majority of that is ag and tillable ag. So we do see a lot of the ag industry coming to our office looking for those technical and financial services. We have 361 lakes, which is a lot, 21 natural and altered natural water courses. And so when I say natural altered water courses, I mean that it was a public river, could have been altered for drainage 100 years ago, and so it's maintained as both. We have close to 100,000 acres of wetlands and 604 miles of county ditches, and I think another 300 miles of county tile. And Public Works is you guys are the authority for that, and all within 4 major watersheds. So our ask this year is twofold. We have an allocation, and the allocation that comes from the county is used as a match to state and federal grants that we use for implementation of projects. And we are also looking at moving out of our existing space, which is in the privately owned building, which the USDA rents. We have about 300 square feet for 4.5 employees. It's getting a little cramped. But our needs for conservation have grown exponentially over the last several years, and it's just going to it will increase. So what I'm going to do real quick is go through our statutory obligations and duties to give you an idea. I put it in a pie chart of where each of these slivers really come into play when it comes to how our office is handling workloads and how our supervisors are managing annual budgets and annual work plans. So I'm going to start with our biggest because I think this is the most important, that being cost share. So I'm just trying to, my notes. What is cost share? So cost share is when landowners come in looking for technical and financial assistance for anything that meets the needs of our organization's charter. Landowners come in for resource improvements, landowners come in for erosion control technical assistance, sometimes financial assistance, and I'm going to show you a few of those projects later on. So in 2022, we did around $70,000 of cost share project implementation, and on average, we do around $120,000. As of July 1st, we are at $361,000 of implementation on the year, and we estimate that it's going to be a little bit over $500,000 in 2024. So I'm going to just do a tour through the county just to give you a highlight of some of the projects that we've done, some of the projects we're working on. You can certainly ask questions if you have any. Just want to make sure that you guys are aware of the different variety of projects that we do.
Excuse me, Margaret. Members of the board, we have a little more time today, perhaps, and because of the light agenda, do you prefer to ask the questions as they come to you?
That'd be okay.
Are you okay with that?
That's totally fine. Yeah.
Okay, so if anybody has any questions, just get my attention. I had one, did you have one?
No, I was just gonna say, we have it
In-
in our board packet, so if you wanted to take it off the screen so you have your notes, that's
Sure.
okay. You want me to
I did
that?
add one additional, yeah, that would be great.
Okay,
So-
I can take, if you're okay with
Yep.
that, Mr. Chair, I
No,
can
that's
take it
fine.
off, so you're more comfortable with your notes.
helpful.
We all know how that goes, so, so now if you pull that up on the
Yep.
laptop, you can see your notes.
Yep, thanks.
So I had, now I lost my question.
So I got a question.
Go ahead, well,
Okay.
for mine.
All right, thanks,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair. So you came with county statistics, and
Yeah.
at first I thought our total acres was 455,000, but that's just tillable acres.
Yeah, so
You
I
said
think
about a
it's-
million?
I think it's 565. I don't remember the exact total.
Total county acres?
Total county acres. Yep,
Okay, so
Yep.
500 and what?
560 some thousand
Okay.
acres.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So tillable also means pasture land, but used for ag,
Okay,
used for
s-
agriculture.
So when you add in the lakes and then the wetlands, that's the total?
What's left? Yeah.
That is the
It-
total? then?
well,
Okay.
it will not necessarily because we do have some woods.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. Because that was kind of my question. The
Sure.
rest, is that all woods or is it where,
Okay.
like towns and stuff?
Commissioner Berg.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Just a couple questions. How do we compare to other counties when I look at your slide at 361 lakes and 4 major watersheds? I'm sure every county is so different, but that must
Yeah.
be kind of one of the more extreme counties with that many watersheds or
So
not?
some of the
And-
bigger counties like Otter Tail, they have over 1,000 lakes, but they
Wow.
also have 7
Okay.
watersheds. You know, you have bigger lakes like Lake County and
Sure.
St. Louis County, which are substantial. But a lot of those counties are in public ownership, where you're seeing forest lands through, you know, federal forest lands. Here, it's a really unique situation. Honestly, in West Central Minnesota, there isn't any other counties like that, like us.
That's what I thought. I had felt.
So I had a question about, you said the supervisors basically set your goals and your agenda. That's maybe not the right word. Is that updated annually? I mean, it must be different today than it was during the Dust Bowl years and when the SWCD was established. How do they go about deciding what the priorities are?
Right. So we do what's called a local work group. Everyone's invited. And we sit down and establish priorities for the year based on the type of funding we get from the state and feds.
And then, speaking of funding, you talked about the dollars that you spent so far this year and what you anticipate. What % of that is a local match? Maybe that's not that simple of a.
Yeah, so I think it's around 25 to 30%.
And that could be either county funds or landowner match, or is it all landowner match?
It could be county funds, and in most cases, we do require landowner match, but it depends on the funding that we're using. Some of the state's funds are now coming at a 90%, 10% landowner match because these projects are expensive.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Okay. So starting in the Northeast, so Green Lake Township, this landowner called our office after a major storm event. They were concerned about some erosion taking place within their field. We were able to provide technical assistance where we complete surveys, we design a project, we're making sure the landowner is okay with the design. We do that in partnership, and we were able to provide cost share to the landowner. Yeah, let me just. Okay. So the erosion fix was sediment bases, terraces, grass waterways, and the total project cost was close to $80,000. And I don't know a lot of landowners who have $80,000 of cash for those types of intense practice improvements, but the district was able to pay 75%, including that technical assistance. I do have a purple arrow on there, and I know that this bird's eye view doesn't really show, but there's a 50-foot fall from the very center of this 40 acres to where the arrow is ending. And so the sud basins that you see kind of terraced down are helping provide that fix to the erosion issues within the land, within that 40 acres. The next project we did was within the county park system down in Big Candy Lake. We worked with County Public Works on designing and installing a native buffer portion, and we were able to provide financial assistance close to $10,000. We did some native plugs and provided the technical assistance to which native plugs would work in that area. The challenging part about the South Fork is we have known surface to groundwater interactions and connection. So it's really, really important to provide that filtering protection to groundwater through filtering of the native buffer. I do have one additional slide that I added yesterday, so I'm gonna just share my screen. But basically, we worked with the city of Wilmer, and we had previously mowed areas within their park system. They were interested in not having to mow, turning it into pollinator habitat. And so we were able to improve around 11 acres of unused mowed space into pollinator habitat. And the reason why this is important is if you were to add up all the animals in the world and all of the bugs in the world, bugs outweigh us. They also need a home to be, and we also need them for a lot of things that they do in the environment, like pollination for our food. So that's all I have.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. Margaret, I live very close to one of those areas, the Southview Park.
Great.
And so one of the questions that I think people have when they see this, they're not seeing much in the way of the wildflowers and those types of plantings. And can you speak to the amount of time that it takes for something like that to actually come up? Because my understanding is that it takes several years before that really takes hold.
That's right. And ongoing maintenance that we're doing with the city and their department is just to make sure that we are providing a successful establishment. But yeah, 3 to 5 years, sometimes 10. If you get a chance to go down to a Stingers game, the Swanson Park one looks lovely. That's a really great example of what it could look like a couple years from now. But ongoing maintenance, but it's much less maintenance than mowing. So I think that just making sure that we are making people aware of, once it is established, it'll kind of reseed itself and kind of does its own little ecosystem of that seed bed is there. But that maintenance does take some time, and it does take several years to establish.
Sure, because, and the reason it comes up is that somebody said to me recently, what are they doing back over there? And I tried to explain it, and they said, all I see is grass that's not being mowed, and it's, waist high or higher.
Right.
So, and I basically said, you got to be patient with this.
Gonna take some time.
Wildflowers are on their own schedule.
They are, yeah.
2 quick questions about that.
Yeah.
Are those native species that are being planted there, prairie species? And will there be a controlled burn at some point as, don't know yet.
Possibly. I mean, I think it depends. Commissioner Gardner was saying, it does take some time to establish, and in order to establish, there are different ways of maintaining that could provide better structure to that vegetation, and sometimes that is a burn. Sometimes it is just a mowing. I know that the city has been doing some chemical treatment on some of the thistles that have been coming up, or just hand removal. We're working with them pretty closely on doing that. It's been a really great partnership.
But those would be like a spot type of
That's right.
application.
Yep.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the only thing I haven't heard any complaints, but if people are, if people are interested in what we're doing, they can certainly call our office. The only person that has provided us any feedback was wondering why we hadn't done it a long time ago. So. Okay. Next, we have another project with Kaneohe County Fair Board. So they approached the district regarding some stormwater and retrofits on the county grounds on Foot Lake. This lake is an impaired water body. It's a priority in our plan. So we were able to provide some technical and financial assistance. I know that they're doing a massive project over there. The stormwater portion, which I circled in blue, is around $170,000, and our cost share is 75% of the construction. The cross-section of the project is basically just a portion of the engineered designs that shows we have some engineered soils for that initial 2-inch rain event, and then an overflow in the event of bigger storm events. Yep.
Roger.
Go ahead.
Just so everybody knows, that if you want to drive by, that project is in progress, so they are working on it. So if you want to see a lot of dirt being moved and stuff, it's kind of interesting just to drive by and see how much dirt they've moved already, and they're hoping to be done in a couple of weeks. So it's really coming along. So
So by the time the fair is,
it should be, yeah, they're going to be done and everything will be ready to go for the fair. So Margaret's crossing her
Fingers
fingers.
Okay, so that, okay,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair, I have a question about that. So the dirt that's being moved, is it being just left on the fairgrounds? I mean, are you moving it around there? Or
In the stormwater portion?
Or is some getting hauled away? or-
The stormwater portion, yeah, we're actually having to remove some of the dirt. I think they're using it in other spaces on the fairgrounds. I can't speak to that, Commissioner Anderson, but the stormwater does require a particular engineered soil to allow that infiltration. So we are bringing some different engineered soil to come to the site
Okay,
in the stormwater portion. I can't speak to the other part
Okay.
of the work being done.
all right, thank you.
So internal loading, in February, the district contracted with Stantec to complete a feasibility study of internal loading on the Wilmer Chain of Lakes. And this is going to help address excessive nutrient levels and poor water quality that we've seen on this chain of lakes for years. we were able to collect sediment core, and we brought those samples to UW Stout for lab analysis to make sure that we can identify the internal loading treatment feasibility and the costs associated with potential solutions. This is very similar to a project that I worked on out east of here, Hubbard Schultz Wheeler in the Diamond Lake subwatershed. Very similar in nature, and they're going to provide us some solutions. And then after that, we get to decide as a community what's going to be best for that chain of lakes. So another pretty simple yet effective solution is farmstead windbreak, which if you do it appropriately using state and federal technical standards, what it does is it reduces wind velocity, which can help reduce energy use on a farmstead. It also traps snow away from buildings and roads. The picture that you see up in the top left is year 2, and the picture that you see in the bottom right is year 12. So it's 10 years, just to show you how a farmstead windbreak looks. The next is some erosion issues. This is Shakopee Creek. It's the headwaters of a major branch of the Chippewa. This system is in an area where there's tons of man-made basins, and it's a part of the county that has highly erodible soils. So in order to complete stream restorations, and some of the risks would be just the flood reduction, improved water quality, enhancing that fish habitat and abundance, reducing pollution, and definitely providing wildlife habitat. We're working with a few landowners up there, but just one portion, the estimated project cost is around $1.2 million. Altered hydrology, or just hydrology that is altered by infrastructure, in this case, a dilapidated river crossing. In order to complete this project, it would help, provide fish access into spawning areas, and also ease in the migration of aquatic organisms. So in order to restore that natural flow, this culvert would have to be removed. We do actually have some threatened and endangered species that live in the Shakopee, and this project would restore that much needed habitat.
Could I ask a question? Mr.
Yes.
Chair? So the erosion one, where's that photo, or am I allowed to ask that, or?
Yeah, so that's just downstream of Lake Andrew, the headwaters, and that's one of like 19 projects just along one strip.
Okay.
That's pretty bad.
And if I may,
Yeah.
did I hear you say something about endangered species in that?
Yep. Yeah, so in this particular stretch of the river, the pugnose shiner, people who fish might recognize shiners as something that you would use to catch fish, but the pugnose shiner is listed as threatened and endangered, and it lives along the Shakopee Creek in this area. And so what happens with state funding is when you identify something that you're going to attempt to fix for a threatened and endangered species, it just becomes a higher priority on the list of projects statewide.
Okay, and that's in that Lake Andrew area, or is that further to the east?
Lake Andrew area. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So now I'll get into some programs. As you guys all know, One Watershed, One Plan is the comprehensive watershed management plans that we have been involved with. And with that being said, we have 4 major planning areas in the county. So that means we work with 17 counties now, 17 soil and waters, 3 watershed districts, several joint powers boards, several watershed management organizations. But this is where the funding is getting pooled to. And so we still receive state cost share to the political boundary that is the county. But a majority of the funding, back in 2014, they thought watershed planning is the best way to do it, to identify those areas, working with your downstream neighbors and upstream neighbors to identify the most important areas in the watershed to work. So that it's not limited to a county or a jurisdictional boundary. And I could argue that at least 3 of the 4 major watersheds leave the county. We aren't getting anyone else's water. Yet we have a lot of major impairments that start here, 44 actually to be exact, E. coli impairments, excess nutrient impairments, fish and biomass impairments, to name a few.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, several of us are in the same watershed plan with, with your organization as well. And I just wanted to just make some comments, like, for example, the fairgrounds, that was, some of that funding then came out of that one watershed plan for
That's right.
Rock Creek.
Yep.
I remember you were there as part of that presentation. So as you booked on those dollars, 174,000, was that all from the one watershed plan?
Yeah, so that's
It
where
looked
the.
like it wasn't. And
Yep, no, that's, I think we made a use some state cost
I
share
thought.
as well. But the state's really just wanting to support this concept of watershed planning. And so pooling the funding there and having us work with these other organizations to determine the best projects in the best locations. Sometimes that doesn't mean there's a landowner who's interested in working with us, but that's okay, we move on to the next project. In the case of the fairgrounds, Foot Lake is impaired. That lake came up in the planning effort as a priority, and so when the fairgrounds approached us for funding, that was just a no-brainer.
Sure. I just really like to comment about the One Watershed plans and your organization, how much collaboration you do. You collaborate with a lot of different
Yeah.
agencies, including the county and different commissioners, but, individuals and other departments as well, and counties and states.
Yeah, it's a huge area. It covers a lot of different organizations, 17 counties and soil and waters, and when the funding gets pooled there, that's who you work with now.
Yep.
So I'll move into some of the other programs that we do. We have a service program for seeding and trees, and we did 750 acres in 2023 of native prairie restoration, working with 55 landowners, and we sold 15,000 trees.
Could I ask a question?
Go ahead.
So with these windbreaks and stuff, it's got to be a challenge to find trees that are disease resistant, right? I mean, because we've got emerald ash borer, we got oak wilt, and then there's, of course, Dutch elm disease. Are we having that with other trees too, issues, or is it?
I can't speak to that,
Okay.
Commissioner Anderson, but
Siberian elm.
we actually still do sell ash trees.
Okay.
People are interested. They're a great tree. They're a hardwood. They last a lifetime. It's still okay to plant them in particular areas of the county. I would say if there isn't a massive forest corridor coming to your farmstead and you're really interested in ash, although it's not something that we usually support because we just have no idea, or that emerald ash, I mean, it's here.
Yeah.
If it's gonna come and wipe out your entire farm Winstead break.
Yeah, because I was at a meeting, it was a Diamond Lake Association, meeting, I believe it was, and a guy there, he came from Olmsted County, and he said within 10 years, once it comes into your area, he said, you probably won't have any more ash trees.
Right.
So that was really discouraging to hear, so.
Very discouraging. So another concern is the issue of groundwater. Human activities, we know, elevate the levels of nitrates in groundwater. And the drinking water standard for nitrates is 10 parts per million. We did a nitrate clinic this spring, and in northern parts of the county, we were at around 13 parts per million, which people should not be drinking that water. Consuming too much nitrates can affect how blood is carried in your body. So it can cause anemia, cardiovascular disease, lung disease. And we know that there are portions in our county that where we have sand and gravel aquifers or fractured bedrock, where we have these aquifers that people are drinking that are a lot more susceptible and sensitive. And a portion of what we do, and it's not required, but if you have an unused or abandoned well, you're not required to seal it, but we really hope you come into our office. We can get you funding to seal it. And if you haven't lately, please check your drinking water, because it just becomes very concerning that these people had no idea, and we don't want people to get sick from our drinking water. This map shows.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
So the sealing the wells, I sealed 4 wells. I think I got funding one time for 1. That was all I did. But anyway, it can cost quite a bit of money. What is the assistance that you guys provide for that?
Yep.
What's the dollar amount, and
Really good question.
50/50 or 60/40?
Actually, we do, so in the Bonanza Valley, which you're seeing in red, it's 100% up to $2,500. The last well we sealed, the picture, that's within the municipality of New London. This is just right in this guy's backyard. And if you are in a wellhead protection area or a drinking water supply management area, so if you live within a municipality, the green and the blue, or you live in a sensitive area where we know we have shallow bedrock or gravel aquifers, we provide 100% up to $2,500. But of course, we limit that. I think we can only do like 4 a year. That's all the money we have for. But it's still really important. We want to help people, so get on the list. If you can't do it this year, we can do it next year. Please tell everybody.
Thank you.
Yes. Wetland Conservation Act, you guys might be aware, in 1991, the legislature approved the act just to make sure, I mean, this was the most sweeping wetland protection law in the country at that time. This was to protect any wetland that wasn't already publicly owned. And this program promised a no net loss. So at that moment in that day, no one was allowed to drain any wetlands after that. And any remaining wetlands could not be lost unless they were replaced. So we partner with Kaneohe County Environmental Services Department to complete implementation of this program. Another program we have is the Reinvest in Minnesota program. So this is a program that seeks to retire marginal ag land and take it completely out of agriculture production, restore it to what it was previously. Usually that means prairie or wetland. And the landowners are paid to retire that land and are required to maintain it into perpetuity. Another program you guys might be familiar with, CRP, or Conservation Reserve Program. This program is administered through the Farm Service Agency. However, we do provide a lot of technical and financial assistance as the state is providing CRP incentive work to local soil and waters to bypass the federal system. So that's been interesting and new this year. Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program is also voluntary. I mean, all these programs are voluntary. It's a federal state funded program, and the target is actually in the 55 counties in the southern and western portion of Minnesota. Both of these programs usually are 10 to 15 years in length and have a long-term goal of improving, you guessed it, water and soil. And we have the highest workload of CRP in the entire state, Kaneohe.
Say that again.
Fun fact.
What
We
was it?
have the highest workload of CRP in the entire state.
So
There's the most CRP contracts
Per capita or per acre or just?
per county.
Wow. I just never knew that.
The buffer law, you guys know, was some legislation passed a few years ago, which would require a 50-foot buffer along lakes, rivers, streams, and a 1-rod buffer along ditches. We partner with Kaneohe County Public Works Department to complete implementation of this program. Another program we have is the Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification Program. This is a voluntary farm incentive program that works by scoring farm operations of their water quality impact, and any farm that earns high scores would earn immunity to any regulation for a period of 10 years. And we certified 8 landowners last year. A few other programs that we have, not a major workload, but something that we do have partnerships with is the Minnesota Walk-in Access Program. We do that with the DNR. Where you can open your land to public hunting. This is pretty popular on people who have completed some type of conservation like CRP. We do rainwater monitoring with the climatology office at the university. We do some partnership with the county on aquatic invasive species. And we provide technical permitting support to the DNR, ecological and water resources for permits that come through their office. And that is how each of the statutory duties and responsibilities relate back to the county benefit of maintaining healthy soils, supporting biological diversity, reducing pollutants, restoring hydrology, and maintaining healthy streams and lakes. Any questions?
Well, thank you, and if- I'm gonna apologize and thank you guys for your patience because we've gone over, there was more questions and there might still be some more, but I have to say, I've been around agriculture for all my life and been part of the SWCD and part of these programs, but I'm still sort of amazed at sort of the ground that we're losing, no pun intended. But we seem to be falling behind in our maintaining the quality of our resources. And, you know, if you go to about this time of the year in southern Minnesota or in the areas of southern Minnesota, we're hearing warnings almost daily about it's not safe to fish in that lake, it's not safe to swim in that lake because of blue-green algae. And just recently, Eagle Lake was one of the lakes that was is close to being considered impaired. And it's always cheaper to, just like in medicine, it's always cheaper to prevent than it is to repair or to heal. So I'm gonna do whatever I can to support, you know, the efforts of the SWCD, and I don't know how we'll figure out the funding part of it, but, you know, we'll turn over every rock we can as far as I'm concerned. And I think the timing is as good as it can be with the One Watershed, One Plan and the funding that has been put forth into the, through Bowser into the projects, the block grants. But you know, the bigger picture here for Kaneohe County, in my opinion, is just like broadband, tourism is important to this country. Kelly Ash recently, and I think most of you guys saw that presentation, talked about chasing people rather than smokestacks, and broadband and business growth and our environment, especially in Kaneohe County, where the second biggest industry is tourism. All of those work together to make Kaneohe County a good place to live and work and recreate. So I think this is just part of the puzzle, and I'll get off my soapbox now if somebody else has any questions or comments that they want to make. Commissioner Anderson.
I'm going to come at this as a farmer because that's what I am, and that's what this program really, I think, helps a lot with. And I want to thank Margaret and their whole team. I have been very impressed with the work that organization has done in the last couple of years. I think that the more we are able to help them out with messages and with funding, I think the county's just going to become better in these watersheds. With this one plan, I think there's available funding to help people, but it still goes back to the farmers and the landowners have to be willing to be partners with the Soil and Water Conservation District. If they're not, this can't happen. So I think that's still the message that we need to get out there, is that the farmers have to be willing to work with these organizations to improve our ground and our land too. But thank you very much, Margaret.
Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Margaret, my district is entirely within the city limits of the city of Wilmer, so for the most part, I don't have to deal with ditches or anything like that. But recently, you were featured in the paper regarding a discussion around water quality beginning at the Uptown Wilmer site, the old Candy Mall. That was a surprise to me. And I'm just wondering what the potential project there is.
So I know we've hit a lot on ag and we've been pretty ag centric, but let's not forget we have lots of impervious surface too, especially within the Wilmer and the municipality of Wilmer. The premise there for the South Fork Comprehensive Plan was a priority of fixing urban stormwater. And so one of the priorities within the plan identify how we can attempt to infiltrate and treat pollution and stormwater runoff in our impervious areas. And our office has done some of those, but on more of a micro scale. And starting with the city of Wilmer and doing pollinator habitat, having a root structure of 20 feet with native pollinators versus a couple inches with turf grass is just kind of a start. The landowners actually had mentioned that they'd be interested in doing some work to improve some of their runoff in their parking lot area. And we work with any landowner who's willing to implement conservation on their property. So,
That was an interesting article, and for anybody who's interested in that particular topic, I'd recommend that folks go back and take a look at that, probably in the Tribune archives.
sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you for coming in, and
Thank
thank
you
you
all.
for, helping us to understand the headwinds that we're facing here in terms of our resources in Kaneohe County.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, next on our agenda, the Broadband Committee update and request. So Mark and Sarah, again, thank you for your patience.
Not a problem. Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Mark Beshin, I'm the Chair of the EDC's Broadband Committee. Sarah Swedberg, Business Development Manager with the EDC, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. We come with great news. This last week has been really filled with great news for the county. First, just want to say, as far as broadband is concerned, I appreciate your continued support for broadband, putting dollars into that. A lot of these projects wouldn't happen without county support, and that we continue to make great gains recently. So just want to give you a quick update on some projects and some other news you've maybe heard. First, I just want to talk about the West project that we're doing with Federated Telephone, which is the St. John's, Mamre, Arctander, and Dovry. Construction has started. I took a ride out towards Priam, and I see construction there also along Highway 40, mainly in the St. John's area right now. So good news for that we are seeing cable, or at least conduit in the ground. So good news for that project. That project's 645 properties, so a good portion there. The second good news came from Reconnect, the Reconnect 4 project. And Reconnect is a funding source from the USDA, which also actually came from the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. We're funded with around $700 million for the country. Meeker Co-op was awarded about $19 million from that project, and that is due to 90% lack of sufficient internet access. So they got a 100% grant because of the location's 90% lack of sufficient access.
How much was that dollar amount?
The total dollar amount was $19 million. And that included, they had areas in Kaneohe, Meeker, and Stearns County for that. So for our purposes, it's portions of Burbank, Roseville, and Irving townships. We anticipate working with them in the future about covering some additional areas because of that. The way that you have to kind of carve out these areas to meet that 90% leaves gaps, and we want to close those gaps as well. So I foresee more projects up in that area as well. So that was the first good news, which was great news. We've applied, or Meeker has applied a couple times for
May I
that.
interrupt you?
Sure.
The reason that one is really significant is we didn't have to use any of our ARPA dollars for that one. It's 100% funded by USDA Rural Connect, which is huge news, because that allows the dollars that we allocated to go further to fill some other gaps that would have been difficult to fill.
Yeah, we appreciate, this was a Meeker Co-op application. The Broadband Committee really didn't have any say in it other than just to continue support in any way we can, because it didn't require any support from us or from the county. So a huge thanks to them and getting this moving. So certainly. And the second great news we had was technically 2 awards from the state, from the Border to Border Broadband Grant Program, also from Meeker Co-op, with Harrison, Lake Elizabeth, and East Lake Lillian Townships. That project we had put together in 3 months to meet the deadline. got all the townships together, everybody supported it, county supported it, we got all that information ready to go, and was successful in the grant writing between Meeker Co-op, Sarah, Michelle, and others from the Broadband Committee to make that happen. That was a total grant of about $2 million to cover the unserved and underserved areas of those townships, and really looking forward to that project in the southeast part of the county. And in that case, you know, again, I mentioned the county support. You know, the county added about $400,000 to that project. So again, it is important to see this local match, and we see how this local match with the county and the townships really shows successful grants, as Sarah likes to tout her 100% record so far. So really appreciate that. And then going forward, just wanted to update you on a couple things. The state legislature passed a $100 million broadband funding for the biennium. So that is a good money, you know, towards broadband. We see then continued support from the Office of Broadband Development for additional grants. With that, you also probably heard about the $652 million from the BEAD program, which is a federal program administered by the NTIA, which is the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment. And so the state's going to receive $652 million through the Office of Broadband Development, again, increasing, you know, over and above that $100 million that the legislature already approved. So we really anticipate over the next few years seeing great investment in broadband in the state. Unfortunately, it doesn't meet 100%. We're needing probably $1.5 to $2 billion to cover the state, but it's certainly a good step forward.
Okay, so can I ask?
Yes.
That, you said 652 million, is that available for Minnesota?
Yeah, that's what's
That's
Minnesota's
what
been
Minnesota
allocated
portion.
from the
Okay.
federal. Yep, it was a $42 billion bill, and what they did is they essentially gave everybody a minimum of $500 million, and then they divided out depending on how many unserved properties were in your state, and that's how they divided the funding up. So it was right about they gave us the state an estimate. I want to say it's a few months ago or a year ago or something. The estimate, and it was right in that range. So.
And then what's the timeline for that money to be used?
I'm not 100% sure on that, the timeline, where there's possibility that it's at least out till 2025, but I don't know specifically on the timeline.
So it could be a lot of money potentially in the short term anyway.
Yeah, it could, you know, the question is the gap, filling the gap. And that's why I think, you know, we really advocated for the legislature to put forward even more than $100 million, because there is going to be a gap, because as we know, the federal dollars take a while to flow. It's good that it's coming, but we need to fill that gap, hopefully sooner rather than later. But I just don't know.
Okay.
And then, sorry.
Oh, Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
please, thank you. Do you have an estimate or guesstimate of how many townships or what percentage of our county we have left that we haven't have plans and dollars already earmarked for?
I have a guess. The majority would probably be my guess.
Okay. It seems like we've been doing a lot.
Yeah, the unfortunate part is it takes a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and these, you know, one of the good things that came out of the legislature this year is they increased the cap on grants to $10 million rather than $5 million. That's one of the things we've struggled with is, you know, it's going to take us a long time to do, you know, 2 townships at a time. So, you know, if we could get a larger project moving forward and going that way. So that cap of $10 million now from the state is welcome news. Of course, that may limit how many projects are approved with the same amount of dollars. So that it's a, you know, ebb and flow there. But that's good news. It's still going to take time. I don't really have a good number for you on that.
So related to that, I think the national number and maybe the state number reflects a similar of 40% under unserved. Would that be pretty close for Kennewick County too? Have we ever figured that percentage?
Mr. Chair, I think it depends on whether you're talking people or you're talking land area. And I think that's one thing we see. So we have 24 townships in the county, right? And we've talked about the 4 township project. We've talked about the 3 townships with the state money we just got and a portion of another 3. You know, of course, a good portion of Wilmer Township's covered because the city of Wilmer is covered. But when you're talking land mass, we still have a long way to go. If you're talking people, because Wilmer is 50% of our population,
Okay.
you know, those hardest to reach areas are our most rural areas, and those are what take the most amount of time.
It would seem most logical to use people because
Right.
if somebody has 5,000 acres of land in the corner of the county and you get to it, now everybody's served up there, even though it's 5,000. Did you have your hand up?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I think, you know,
But
we use,
using folks, what, is it 40%, do you know?
I had those numbers at one time, I don't.
And then it'll be interesting to know too, that given the current number of successful applications between the Vibrant and the two three border to borders, what will that number be reduced to?
Sure, yeah. You know, I think we use both. It's, when we talk about hitting the last mile, hitting everybody, we really look at probably land more than anything, because if I've got to get to the last one at the end, it doesn't matter how many people are there, I need to still get to the one. So I think we, you know, a lot of times they use passings as a statistic to justify, because you want to hit more people for less money. But when we look at it, it's more honestly land, because yes, 50% of the county is covered, but that's all contained within a, you know, 10-mile square area, and the rest is not. So you kind of have to equate both to the entire problem.
I just want to, Mr. Chair, comment again. A lot of progress has been made, though, and you've been very busy.
Yeah.
You're doing a great job, but compared to this a few years ago. I mean,
Yeah.
we're moving, and I like the point of view of people, or the number of people as well. So we got to balance that. Good job. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Yeah, it's been a fun few years to, after a long kind of hiatus in projects that we worked on, you know, that West project for, you know, 4 or 5 years, to turn around and have a project done in 3 months and be awarded is great news. And we have a really formula to move forward, and that's what I'm really excited about. So, and then the last funding I just wanted to talk about was this Reconnect project. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act also authorized another $755 million for Reconnect for next year. It's kind of a rolling process, but there is an additional $755 million. So there's, you know, we're seeing lots of dollars available, lots of grants available. We, you know, of course, are really the in-between, trying to encourage private investment with government, either, you know, dollars or, you know, whatever way we can help. And it's really been successful, especially we've seen in the co-op side of things, to get these projects moving. So
I do have a question though.
Go ahead.
So that grant that Meeker Co-op was able to get, that USDA grant, how many homes or passings would that be approximately?
So I believe it's 155
Okay.
total. They detailed, it was interesting, you get to these, so what's a passing versus people? They identified people in the announcement, was like 500 people. I don't know if that's, you know, they're assuming 3 people live in a household, but also farms, and there's even I think it was a school or a government, some sort of other piece in there too. So that program, and they have a lot of options as far as you can do grants with it, you can do loans with it within that Reconnect program, because they applied for the 90% who lack sufficient internet access. It really is kind of piecemealed around to get to that 90%, you know, so that this entire area that they have picked is 90% without and 100% grant.
Okay, so now moving forward, because the next round for a state is probably in about 3 months, or haven't they announced yet?
They haven't announced yet, but anticipation would be fall.
Historically, it'd be probably this fall. So that, because we got those 3 townships, Harrison, Lake Elizabeth, and East Lake Lane Township, now we can kind of look to go a little further again.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've already had conversations with a number of different providers to look at certain areas of the county, really almost all areas of the county. Most are waiting, or we're waiting for the state to announce their grants, really due to capacity to continue to do projects. So I anticipate now that that's been announced, we can kind of revisit and see, where these additional projects can happen. So I really see a pretty busy next few months to put these projects together in combination, because really it's the provider who puts the project together, that we're really dependent on them. And so we just want to encourage them to keep coming with ideas and projects and see how we can fund them.
Okay, thank you.
So with that, the last thing I just want to talk about is, those who are included or aren't included in some of these projects, just make sure that you can continue to send letters of support, to the EDC, because we continue to have grants and we want those applications ready and that information ready to go, because as we've seen, it may come in 3 months and we have to make moves quickly. And then also contact, your township supervisors, because really, especially with the state projects, nothing happens without the township. We really look for township and county support in these projects to get them. So talking to your supervisors at townships and saying how important it is to have internet access. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah with a digital equity proposal and recommendation from the committee. Thank you.
Awesome. The last item on this particular agenda item and an action item for you all is related to digital equity. So for those that aren't familiar, digital equity is all about access and affordability of the internet, right? We can put the line up to your house, that's great, but if you don't know how to turn on your laptop, there's no point in having that internet access, right? So we're really focused on those two things. A few months ago, we had a proposal from a nonprofit organization called New Vision Foundation. New Vision was founded by Hussein Farah, who couldn't be with us today, but had a great presentation with the Broadband Committee back in May, talking about this foundation. So he started this foundation to provide coding and software engineering skills to students, primarily to refugees and immigrants and students of color. But it's a program for middle school, high school, and young adults focused on these STEM-related, IT-related skills. They offered their first class in 2016. They're pretty heavily involved in the schools in the Twin Cities area. Ramsey County, I know, is a very large partner of theirs, but they're also looking at expanding into greater Minnesota, which we're really excited for. So they currently have some presence in St. Cloud, and they're looking and working actively to expand into the Wilmer area. Their mission is to create pathways to success by motivating disadvantaged youth in Minnesota through coding and digital literacy classes, engage responsible companies in IT philanthropy, and inspire progress towards global sustainable development. Hussein has been working with the Chamber of Commerce, with Ken Werner, and with Zach Mahboub in Midtown Plaza in downtown Wilmer, the old Erickson Furniture Store. They've actually started to build out some space for this particular development. What they're asking of us locally, they've been successful in achieving some grants, but they're looking for that local contribution. And just like we've seen with these broadband grants and the infrastructure grants, having that local contribution that complements state and federal funding is always a nice mix of funding. So what they're asking for locally is $35,000, so one-time contribution for computer hardware and software and other equipment that they need to finish out that space. That's leveraged by $150,000 of other funding sources, grants and other sources there. And again, this $35,000 is put directly towards that hardware and that equipment in that space. The classes will be open to all, and certainly will encourage people to check it out and to consider sending their students or young adults. I was at a conference last week in Rochester for the Economic Development Association of Minnesota, and I sat in on a workforce session. And the one thing that stood out to me as I was thinking about this particular presentation is that they had some data that in 2022, which is the newest data that they have available, software developers are now actually the top ranking occupation that has a shortage in our state. So supporting a project like this not only hits these digital equity goals that we have, but is also a workforce solution piece that we want to bring to the table as well. So that's what I present
All
to
right,
you.
so-
The recommendation from the broadband committee is to go ahead and approve that 35,000 for New Vision.
Commissioner Berg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple questions. My first one would be, all the additional funding or project budget, have all those been approved at this point then? So this budget worksheet that we have in front of us, then we're the last piece to buy onto this, or has the Southwest Initiative Fund and the Wilmer Foundation and so forth, have they all made commitments to those dollars?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know for sure, like the RISE grant you're seeing on there, that's been secured, along with some of that membership income is coming from some of their other facilities that currently exist and some of the funds that they have available to contribute. I think the SWIFT and the Wilmer Area Community Foundation, I'll have to get confirmation on that, but I think they're in the works. I don't know that they're finalized yet.
Okay.
But I do think that putting these ARPA dollars as a part of the package is going to help get the rest of these across the finish line that are needed and help them secure additional funding in the future.
And another question I had, if I may follow up on it, approximately how many students are they looking at per year? And in addition, where would it be located? Any idea yet?
Yeah, so the classes themselves would be located in Midtown Plaza, which is the old Erickson Furniture Store building in downtown Wilmer. I know in other counties, as they've established that they do work with the school districts quite a bit. And of course, we at the EDC are always encouraging when school districts are involved. I think Wilmer's the first one to go to, which is great. But not forgetting that there are several other school districts that are along the other sides of the county too, are kind of surrounding Wilmer. So we always make sure we can provide those connections to those additional school districts to make sure all kids in the county have access to those. It won't be Candy Ojai County specific. I think they'll continue to take kids from wherever they might be coming from, but I do think the majority of those students will be coming from Candy Ojai just because of the timing of the classes and driving distance and all of that stuff.
Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sarah, did I hear you say in passing here that the request is for $35,000 from our ARPA funding for this project?
Yeah, what we had proposed through the broadband committee was to go ahead and use the ARPA funds that have been set aside for broadband or earmarked for broadband projects, digital equity being one of those important.
And as far as we know, and perhaps this is a question for our administrator, there's no restriction in terms of being able to use the ARPA funding alongside some of these other grants, government grants. I know we run into this periodically.
No.
Where you can't use federal funds to essentially to supplant federal funds.
Right, within the ARP funds, yes, this is under the broadband, and the base purpose of the American Relief Plan dollars was to help digital equity and inclusion as well. So I think if we use the already ARP dollars set aside for broadband, this is a good use of these funds as well, and it's not affecting any use of any other federal funds.
Well, and I'm going to agree with that. This is certainly, I think, a good and proper use of that ARPA funding, and I think the project has a lot of merits. Being able to reach a lot of young people with the type of training that they need to succeed in today's highly competitive world, especially folks who maybe don't have that leg up like some may because of their socioeconomic status. I think this is a wonderful project, and you're asking for action on this today?
Yes, please.
Then to that point, Mr. Chair, I would move that we authorize a grant of $35,000 of our ARPA funding for the New Vision project.
So Commissioner Gardner moves to approve the request. Do I hear a second?
I will second that. And I'd have a comment.
Commissioner Berg seconds, and go ahead with your comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel a little uncomfortable taking that out of the broadband grant or the money we set aside some time ago now for expanding broadband and using it for a program like this. But also all these ARPA dollars are one big pot of money we're looking at. So, but I didn't want to short broadband expansion with this 35,000 we'd be giving there. But I think we'd have to have an open mind when we go into this and support this. And if we have more need, we're going to have to look for that. That makes sense?
Yeah. I don't have any concerns about it. We've got about $3 million of the 6 left. And 35,000 out of a pot of 6 million, is really peanuts. And it is, one of the goals of the broadband committee is also for digital equity. It's something we don't talk about a lot, and that's unfortunate, and we need to start talking about it more. We look at infrastructure. Infrastructure is easy. You can hold it and put it in the ground, but, train people, disadvantaged, underrepresented classes, that kind of thing that we don't think about, especially when you look in Wilmer, we don't talk about infrastructure in Wilmer, but we can certainly talk about digital equity. I can't think of the program's called now, but where the federal government funds $30 a month for your broadband program, your individual, that type of stuff.
Mr. Chair. Yes, along the same line, you're talking about the 3 million left, and I'm sure it's really hard to predict, but we have to spend those ARPA dollars, as everyone knows, by a certain time. And at some point, if we don't have the opportunity to totally use those dollars for expansion, we have to look for other resources or other plans. And
Right.
So let's kind of keep a heads up on that as we move forward.
Yeah, appreciate that, and certainly something we've already talked about in the broadband committee. As far as the chair, my intention is to give you as much time as is not to hand it at the last minute, the committee to use it, but to give you ample time if we don't use all the money. I'm encouraged by what happened this last round and what money we can continue to use. And for other programs that we are, working with, our vice chair, Michelle Moratsky, has been heading up a digital equity committee from the state that they got a grant for to move into more information about the digital equity program. So it's just really another piece of that puzzle. And I think the more education we get out there, the more demand there's going to be for infrastructure for other things too. So I'm excited because, we really have kind of a short time, but things are moving quickly. So we're going to do everything we can to be responsible, but yet use as much as we can for broadband infrastructure, digital equity in those.
Thank you.
Did you have a comment?
I was just going to say, if that's okay, that we have to appropriate the ARP funds by December 31st, 2024. So we have about a year and a half, and Mark and I have had many conversations that I want to make sure that we give the board, so if we're not going to use the remainder of those 3 million, which we hope we do for broadband, but if we do not, that we have enough time to bring that back to the board, say how much money we have, and then the board can solidify a plan for those dollars that are remaining. So we do have time on the appropriation for broadband.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I would just say that I think it's right about a year ago now, we were at that function at Mystic Lake.
Yeah.
You guys were sitting on one side of the room, I was sitting on another side of the room, and Mr. Farah was one of the Farah, am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Was one of the panelists at that presentation, and it was about connecting and equity and access. And independent of each other, we kind of came up with the idea, hey, this might be a good opportunity for us. And I did everything come with some risk. One of the risks is that these kids that they're trying to reach, this population that they're trying to reach, won't be interested, and it'll just fall. But I had a conversation with some of my colleagues from Ramsey County, who has also worked with this organization, New Vision. And they're pretty excited about the things that they're doing in Ramsey County. And they're also working in Stearns County in the St. Cloud area. So I think this is a very minimal risk to take. And we'll go ahead and vote on this first, but I also have a little additional information regarding the federal dollars that just came a few minutes ago. So any other comments or questions? Then we have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Before you guys go, talking about the BEAD grant, the announcement, which is BEAD stands for Broadband Equity and Access Deployment. So even at the federal level, this equity and access is a huge, equity comes up in just about every conversation, whether it's transportation or broadband or housing or whatever. It's a huge component of successful grants at this point. But I had, this goes a little bit into our reporting, but I wanted to do it before you guys left. I got a phone call about 10 days ago from Matt Hilgart from the Association of Minnesota Counties, and I had the distinct privilege and honor to represent the county commissioners across the state of Minnesota at AMC, our Association of Minnesota Counties office, where Secretary of Commerce, a cabinet member, Gina Raimondo was there. Senator Tina Smith, Senator Amy Klobuchar, Bree Mackey from the Office of Broadband, Lieutenant Governor Flanagan. They made a really big deal about this program, and it is a really big deal too. $652 million for the state of Minnesota. One of the things that, and the president of NTIA was there, am I saying it right? National, he's from Watonwan County, the current president. We made as big a point as we possibly could to consider, and part of the reason I was invited, by the way, is because of how hard Kaneohe County has worked on this in this area for 15 years now. And to answer your question about the funding, they're not exactly sure how it's going to be disseminated yet or when. It won't be in this, we probably won't see it in fiscal 2024. But one of the things we tried to impress upon them was Minnesota's done a really good job of deploying broadband funding. And so I mean, in some ways, I wish they would divide it by the population and give Kaneohe County our amount, let us work with it, but that's probably not gonna happen. So we'd like to see them put it into, make it available to the state, to the Office of Broadband, just like the 100 million that the legislature put in. And this was important, don't dump it on us all at one time. Because we just don't have the resources to deploy that amount of work in a short period of time. The providers couldn't do it. So I think they were listening, and they're still, the Secretary of Commerce was working, that'll be her, in her wheelhouse to decide that, or their wheelhouse, I should say, Commerce Department. So more to find out about that. But that was really exciting news. I mean, we're excited about 100 million over the biennium. This is 652 million. So it's a lot of money, but again, won't cover all our ground, but it'll cover a great deal of it. So thank you guys again for all the work you do.
Thank you.
And we'll see you on Monday.
Great, yeah.
All right, do you guys want a break before we do report outs?
Yeah, let's take a little break.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll recess for 5 minutes. The Kaneohe County Board of Commissioners meeting. We will wrap up this meeting by doing our report outs. And I think I started with you last time, right, Dale? So we're going to start with Steve this time. If you're ready.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. With the holiday and everything, a lot of my folks did not meet. I did spend 2 days in meetings down in St. Paul for the SHAC program, State Community Health Services Advisory Committee. And we just had a comment here a little bit ago about how DEI efforts are prevalent in just about anything that we discussed today. And that's also very true about public health. And especially in terms of transforming our public health system into basically version 3.0. And one of the nice things to understand about diversity, equity, and inclusion is that within that realm, we're also talking about differences and needs for rural and urban and everybody in between. Because it shouldn't matter what your zip code is, you should have the same basic access to public health care, no matter where you are in the state of Minnesota. Now, trying to define that and what that looks like, that's an ongoing process. But they were good meetings, and we're looking forward to a retreat for SHAC, and that's going to be the September 28th and 29th. And the intent, I don't know if it's wrapped up yet or not, the intent is to hold it here in Wilmer. And so be looking forward to that. And I know that they're looking potentially for something to do after the first evening in the way of maybe some public health tours or anything like that. If anybody has any ideas, let me know, and I can just pass those along to the staff over at SHAC. Other than that, I survived the heat over the weekend, and that was an accomplishment. And I don't have anything else to report on today.
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Is SHIP part of that state health improvement plan? Did that come out of?
So the three primary entities, I assume they have some involvement, but the three primary entities, of course, are Minnesota Department of Health, and then SHAC, as well as the Health Administrators Association. Those are the three primarily working on this public health transformation. But it would not surprise me if SHIP has some direct or indirect.
Because I remember statewide health improvement plan over the years we've been able to access some funding for some of the trails and stuff that we have. So a thought is if they want to go for a bike ride on the Glacier Lakes Trail or something like that to as a health thing.
I like that idea. Thank you. That's all I have.
Dwayne, you want to go?
Yep. So I had a few meetings since our last meeting, county board meeting, and one was AIS task force. It's aquatic invasive species. We had a vacancy that we filled, and then we also need county board approval. His name is Bill Newman. He'll be our new at-large representative, and then he's from Raymond, I believe. Let's see here. I gotta find it here. I think it's. Yeah, so he's from Raymond, and then he's also he's a longtime member of the West Central Bassmasters, and that's basically why we selected him to get kind of a sportsman involved in the Lake Aquatic Invasive Species Task Force. So with that, I would like to make a motion to appoint or to accept Bill Newman's appointment on the AIS Task Force as an at-large member.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Dwayne Anderson moved, Dale Anderson seconded. Any discussion? Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've known Bill for years, and he's going to bring quite a bit to your organization.
Okay, great.
All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you.
And then during that meeting, we had several discussions. One was about Starry Stonewort, and at the time, they couldn't make an announcement where, or they couldn't tell us where it was, which was kind of unfortunate because it's like, well, you have a new invasive species. Why can't you tell people so we're aware of it? But they did make the announcement the next day, I believe. And so Starry Stonewort has been found in Long Lake up by Howick, which is unfortunate. It's an algae. I guess it really makes a mess of lakes once it gets in there. But they think they can contain it. They're hoping that they can, and so hopefully it gets contained. But it makes sense that it came up there first because of Lake Coronis has it really bad, and so they've spent a lot of money trying to get rid of it there, or control it. So that was that meeting. I also had a drug force coalition, or drug-free coalition. I can't remember exactly how it's worded, but that's kind of a discouraging meeting because, as everybody knows, that cannabis has been legalized in Minnesota now, and we don't know exactly, how to go about different things. It's kind of frustrating where, on the one hand, we're given grant money to fight, or to, promote awareness of drugs and tobacco and alcohol, and to tell people, don't do these drugs. And then at the same time, the state is passing to legalize more drugs. So I think a lot of people there are kind of disappointed, but at the same time, we're trying to figure out how to move forward and what the timelines are for all the different ways that the law is going to come into effect. So I guess that's basically it. Oh, I was going to talk about Weed Fest was another one that is coming up, and it was on our agenda to give them a permit. And it's on Diamond Lake. It'll be July 22nd from 2 to 7, and it is if people, I think primarily it's for people around Diamond Lake, but I think other people can attend. I mean, they're encouraged to attend actually, but it's if you have a type of weed, lake, associated with the lakes, so a lake weed that you don't know what it is, that you can bring it there and they can help identify it. They'll have people there to, that have that kind of experience and can identify those weeds. They're going to have, I believe, a live band going to be there, and then they're going to have a lot of food and beverages, and I think it'll be kind of a fun thing. And they're hoping if it's a success, they'll do it every year, and it's to raise money for the Lake Association on Diamond Lake.
It's almost like a block party for lakes.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
I know when I was on the AIS task force and Starry Stonewort was first getting recognized and dealt with, one of the things they encourage Lake Association folks to do is, I think in September, I think they want to do it in fall. The very simple tool for finding Starry Stonewort is to take 2 garden rakes and fasten them together back to back so the tines are pointing out, and then they put it on a rope and you go along shore. And if you have 4, 5, 6, the more the merrier, boats or pontoons, you toss it in toward shore and pull it back in. And then you can examine what you drag back in, and you can be looking for the Starry Stonewort. It's the easiest way to know, because if they find it early, they can sort of isolate it to that spot.
Yeah,
and
that's what
keep
they're
it from
hoping.
spreading. So it's a good practice, and probably have a little fun doing it too if they.
Oh, can I
Yeah.
mention about the broadband? I'm really excited that we got those grants, and it'll move the county forward. And to kind of address that, my district is 13 townships. So when this is all done, I'll have 4 townships fully covered out of 13. So we got a long ways to go, but it is encouraging. Hopefully we can keep the momentum moving and get the whole county eventually covered with high-speed internet.
I think the part that is really not talked about here, but is probably as positive as anything, is I saw Josh Carlson at a baseball game last night. And once they, like in their case, when they lay out this infrastructure for the 16 million they got, that puts them that much closer to these areas that they had to leave out of the grant application because they're too dense. So he knows the landscape pretty well. He says, we'll be within about 1.5 miles of our store. And he said, to go the rest of the way, he said is not gonna be that difficult if we can get a border-to-border grant. And that's true of other places, you know, in the county where they had to kind of go around so that they didn't get too dense of a application. So same thing with, you know, FedTel and the other ones that are coming in, so, thanks. Dwayne. Dale?
So I gotta admit that I didn't have any meetings for this gap, but what I wanted to talk about though, and I don't know if it's a sentiment of everybody here, but I've had a lot of good conversations with constituents about concerns that they've had. And I just want people out there to know that, you know, you can call us. I guess we don't need to be called if it's something that we can't do for the county, but I've enjoyed the phone calls I've gotten about, you know, mowing along the roads and some lake issues. So that's been kind of the things that I've worked on since last meeting. I've had a few things to follow up on with people for concerns, but it's really interesting to me to get them phone calls to see if I can help somebody answer a question or a concern that they have. So probably my most interesting one that I wanted to bring up was somebody had a concern about chickens over by West Norway Lake. And that's really interesting to me because I didn't know that there actually was a rule that you couldn't have chickens right against the lake. So that was really interesting. So we learn stuff even though we're trying to help other people in the county. So I thought that was interesting.
Did you turn him into Russ Hilgart?
No.
No, Bert. So, but you bring up a point, it reminded me, we're not that far away from the county fair. Who, are you organizing our
Yes.
county fair booth?
Yep, the application is in, and the documentation is there, and we'll be out at the fair again this year.
What about the booth itself? Is there stuff we're gonna need for that to make it look professional?
I suspect that between
the
myself
administrator
and
has some
Commissioner
ideas
Berg,
on
we'll have it covered.
Yep.
We probably do need to have a conversation with Public Works and so forth.
All right, appreciate you guys doing the deal. You-
Well, I'll just give a little update. I mentioned the fair project before. To Dwayne's question about the dirt will all stay on the fairground. So anything that's extra that they're doing actually is going to be piled somewhere down in the racetrack. Because the plan is to eventually maybe try and raise the center of the racetrack up a little bit because that always gets to be a big water area that doesn't want to drain out of there. So they're just going to wait and see how much dirt is left after the project's done. But I think that's going to become a very important thing for the fair and for the county to be able to bring more events up onto the fairgrounds and more things that are people are looking for event space for weddings and receptions, and we've started renting out facilities for that. But I think when it becomes more handicap accessible, that makes it better for everybody. And so I think this is a great project just for the accessibility of the fairgrounds. For the fair, for them days, but also for the whole year for different projects that are going to be going on up there. So it looks like a great project and the weather's behaving, so they should be able to keep moving along good, hopefully. I know Margaret has concern because there's a permit that they're waiting for that project, for the soil and water project. So that's the only really hold back right now. But it looks like a great project, and hopefully everybody can be patient till it's done, and it'll turn out to be a great thing.
So you brought up the fair, again, was it last meeting when Denny and Chad
Yep.
were here? And they had a proposal for a certain amount. Does the city of Wilmer participate in funding the county fair?
They're going to ask for this project, but I don't know other than that. I don't think
Because
they do.
it's a big benefit to the city of Wilmer, and I would think that they'd see some value in supporting that.
It would be great. I mean, any support that the fair could get, the more things that can be accomplished. I mean, that master plan, I think, has got really merit to make our fairgrounds a destination area. But it's going to take a lot of funding and a lot of support. So I'm hoping that other organizations and other entities will be willing to put that money forward.
Because the county also puts a lot of money into extension, which is a
Yep.
big part of county fairs, so.
Yep.
so-
Yeah, it's a big piece of the puzzle.
Good question. Good comment.
Commissioner Berg,
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Mdek. First off, I want to say thank you to Dwayne Anderson for doing open mic with me. Yeah, that went well. It was really nice having two people doing open mic. So I also attended Kelly Ash's trip presentation at Minnesota, and thanks to Commissioner Emdeck's invite to attend that one. I could not attend the chamber one, so that worked out really well. Very interesting, and maybe you can comment on his speech, Commissioner Emdeck, if you wish, when it's your turn. But very good ideas and things to look at as we move forward. I had a Prairie Lakes Youth Program, and things are still moving along there. There's a couple of programs, parts of it are still not holding their own funding wise, but we're still stable and are keeping our head above water, so we're feeling positive, and I'm feeling really good about that. Unfortunately, the director, I believe it was the boys group home, is leaving us, and she's moving to Duluth, and she got married. So I guess we can't do much about that. But they're doing interviews, and I should know by next board meeting, they have several good candidates for that. So we'll know more real soon. I attended the child care, what I call it, an open house at Robbins Island. People interested in being providers or current providers had questions or comments, they could come there. It wasn't, when I was there, I didn't stay for the whole thing, it wasn't highly attended, but it's one of those things I think our presence is important, and there were some individuals that had some questions, and they got their questions answered, so I felt good that that happened. And then along with Commissioner Gardner and who else was there? I believe Commissioner Anderson, the Elevate graduation. Commissioner, you weren't there, okay. Excellent program. Each time it just keeps growing, and it's a good thing for our community, just a good thing. So, and Administrator Baker was there as well, so it was a very good program. So thank you all too. So, and that is it.
All right. So the major meetings I went to, I'm curious, who did see Kelly Ash's presentation? Commissioner Gardner, yeah. So basically, you referred to it as basically his premise is that, we spent most of our lives chasing smokestacks, meaning trying to bring jobs to a community. And now our focus should be bringing people to the community because the jobs are already here. And they're having trouble filling them. And so I think he's onto something with that premise. So I appreciated that presentation. The bulk of my meetings happened in about 4 days, and they all ended up in the Twin Cities area over from June 22nd through June 26th. It was 3 days and out of 4 in St. Paul. AMC Board of Directors met on the a week ago Friday, week ago last, for 2 weeks tomorrow. And the evening before, we had a reception with our premier partners who are our non-dues paying source of revenue. Just about half the revenue AMC gets comes from there. And so we had a reception the evening before, and then our regular meeting. And the only thing of real note to talk about is, so Mary Jo McGuire from Ramsey County, our current president, in July, in 2 weeks, will become the National Association of Counties president. And she is holding a NACO board meeting in December in conjunction with our annual conference. So our annual conference this year, mark your calendars, and note, you probably already have, it's downtown Minneapolis for the last time. It's at the Hyatt Place, I think, or Hyatt Regency, I forget what it's called, on the end of Nicollet Mall. But she's going to be having the National Association of Counties meetings starting on Thursday, I think. We go into town on Sunday typically, and these meetings, I believe, are at the Intercontinental Hotel. So the entire NACO board and staff will be coming to St. Paul for a meeting, and we're all invited. But you have to register yourself and make your accommodations to go there. So anybody is invited to attend that meeting, which I would encourage you to go ahead.
Mr. Chair, that'd be December 7th then? I would guess then.
What is the Sunday?
Sunday's the 3rd.
Third.
So that Thursday you said?
No, I think it's prior to.
Oh.
I think it's the prior Thursday. leading into the NACO conference.
Oh, and sometimes that's our board meeting, I think, right?
November 30th.
Typically,
We
have
always
to
move our board meeting though because of the AMC conference, because
Yeah.
it always lands for the entire state on first Tuesday of the month.
Yeah.
So we'll be moving that anyway. most
Yeah, and I have that.
Yeah. So anyway, that was the AMC. And then
Okay.
Mel and I attended the Transportation Alliance meeting, and Kelsey and I will tag team this a little bit, but generally it was an overview of the IIJA, Investment in Jobs and Infrastructure Bill, and a little more detail as to what it involves. And we had hoped that we would get some detail from the state legislation regarding transportation, because as you recall from the news coverage, that there's new funding for the state transportation, highway user transportation distribution fund. And so we didn't get that kind of detail. Mel sent out a packet, if you read it, that if you work hard at it, you'll kind of figure it out, but still more to come there. But the long and the short of it is that the federal funding, the new funding that comes out of there, Kelsey, you correct me if I'm wrong, if you understood it differently. The new funding that comes into the transportation bill, the IIJA, is for new initiatives, like that equity piece that we talked about earlier. It's just critical that if you're gonna apply for a grant that, for a trail, it better include some sort of equity, or it's not gonna get funded. And so a lot of new initiatives, the carbon reduction thing, the chargers along the freeway. So that's about 25%, Kelsey, is that
Yep.
about right, of the total dollars that go into that act? And then the rest of the money basically expands what we're getting in the state, in our state budgets from it. So but there are some new opportunities. For example, the grant that we just recently received for the railroad crossing over on 55 and 5, we've got about $30,000, I think it is, in fees that we paid was it FRS or
Yeah,
SR?
I'm blanking.
Engineering fee, it's S something. The fees that we paid to get that study done, or
For
get that
technical
application.
assistance.
Technical assistance, we can now get reimbursed for. So that's a $30,000, pretty easy application to get that money back. So there are those opportunities in there, but man, I'm telling you, we could almost use, we talked about this at the beginning of the ARP dollar, we could almost use a full-time person just, looking through couch cushions and finding those dollars. And they add up, I'm telling you, they really do. Mel just reported recently that so last year through the local road improvement plan, we got Dover Township $650,000 for some work that they have to do, and it wasn't enough money, but I think we just got it. He just acquired another $300,000 for that same project. So by paying attention, have somebody paying attention to the opportunities available is really huge. In fact, the bead thing that I attended at AMC was, it was just so lucky, actually, because Senator Smith and Senator Klobuchar were both there. I was able to personally thank them for their support of that bridge out on the southwest part of the city. And I was able to talk to, the day before at the Transportation Alliance thing, or 2 days before, Josh Ortiz, who is Senator Klobuchar's person who runs their community-directed spending program, which is earmarks. He had encouraged everybody, he says, this is not the time to be shy. He says, put your applications in for earmarks. And then 2 days later, he's in the AMC office, part of their contingent, that's not the word I'm thinking of, the group that travels with them. And so he said, I just saw you 2 days ago. And so we were able to revisit that and had the same conversation with Senator Smith's person. So my idea is some pavement on those 2 miles of lanes out on the southwest side of Wilmer. I said that would really finish that project up as we are doing the ramps as we speak. They got started this week, right? So between the bridge and the ramps, if we could get that paved, I think the mayor of Wilmer would really be happy. He's been talking about it at every opportunity. So anyway, that's my report. So Kelsey,
I just wanted to go over really quick, if I
fill in the
may.
gaps that I missed.
No, I think you covered it fine. I just was gonna go over the budget timetable that I sent out to department heads. Excuse me. Jeez. I haven't spoken all morning, really. So as of June 26th until next Wednesday, I'm meeting with department heads and reviewing individual budgets. We did the first run, so I'm inputting, I have an idea of where we're at with the levy, but that's not including utilizing CPA, interest payments, or any reserves. So I have an idea of where we're at. The week of August 15th, at that board meeting, I will do a presentation following the board meeting from 1 to 3. So we'll do a lunch and then we'll do a county budget presentation. Karen Anderson, our chief financial officer, will be at that meeting along with me to help answer any questions that we have regarding the 2024 budget. Also at that meeting, I will go over some ARP funds as well. You know, I gave you an overview or an update in April. I think those two will kind of help offset, or will go together in case we want to offset the budget, utilizing some ARP funds as well. Then at the September 19th meeting, I would ask the board to vote on the preliminary levy. And then either at the November 30th or December 7th, we'll have to schedule the truth and taxation meeting. And then the board will vote on the final levy December 19th. So if you would, we will have to have a vote if you would like the TNT meeting before or after the AMC annual conference. It doesn't matter to me. It's whatever the board wishes you'd want to do.
I think there's a requirement that it has to be done by a certain date, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's in with that time frame.
Okay.
Yep. My goal, just to give you, and you can come
Are
talk
you
to me.
looking for that today? But
No, that doesn't have to be today. But my goal for the levy is to be at a 5% or under, just because of the wage increases that was voted on at the last meeting. So I just wanted to make that clear. I'll help offset using reserves, but we want to be careful with how much reserves we use as well. Per auditor standards, they want, 3 to 5 months. So I'm working through those details now. So if you have any questions or comments regarding the budget up until August 15th, just come and talk to me.
Commissioner,
What am I, how am I going to say this? Good luck this next several weeks. This could be a very stressful time for you, I know. I just want to say that sounds like a very reasonable goal, and then we'll cross our fingers that we can make that work. That with all the changes and inflation and everything going on this past year and then coming up, if we can do that, I think the taxpayers would be fairly happy.
And one thing I always say, and I maybe said this in my interview, is the county administrator, for my job, for customer service, is to listen to the taxpayers and the constituents. But then the other side is for our employees. And we're running an organization, we're providing services. And so it's a twofold on how I look at budgets and how we implement services, and how we are as an organization as a whole. So that all is kind of in my thought process when I go through a budget. So,
yeah, and you've probably already done this, but I'm curious, there's been some new funding sources this year, like county program aid is up, almost 700,000 or something?
yep, 750.
And then we got the pill payment that nobody expected of $50,000, and the opiates. Be nice to have sort of a tabulation of those
We have
sort of new and unexpected,
I am.
perhaps unexpected.
Yep, and I am working on that. We received sheriff's funding as well, just right under $1 million. We have that opioid funding. There was one other thing I was, the CCA subsidy. That money for probation. So there's lots of different funding sources that when I meet with the chair and the vice chair July 26th, we'll go over all of that. My predecessor had a really good presentation that he distributed to the county commissioners in the past. I'm just making a few modifications just to make it a little bit more transparent on how many reserves we're using, because I think that's really good for the public to know as well. Just because if we didn't use the reserves, we would be, maybe at a higher levy amount. And so why we, just kind of explain why we do that, I think is really beneficial in explaining the budget process to the public so that they understand that we're also, we're running essentially an organization as well.
Very good. Anything else that anybody wishes to discuss?